As soon as it was morning, the chief priest, with the elders and the scribes and the whole council, held a consultation. They bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him to Pilate. Now it's the crack of dawn on Friday. So that means it's what they would call Thursday. When the sun rises, it comes to Friday. It's sunrise to sunrise, basically. Yeah. So this is just about to be Friday morning, early. And as Pilate asked them, Pontius Pilate. Pilatos was the prefect of the area. It's like a governor, and it's one of his last chance stops. He had basically been fired a few times per place before and moved around. He wasn't a big fan of the Jews. They weren't a big fan of him. And so now he's the main guy, the Roman leader. And are you the king of the Jews? And notice that it said that, the king of the Jews. Every single time in the gospel you hear the expression, the king of the Jews, it's on people who get it wrong. It's Pilate, it's the chief priests and elders. Whenever they ask him those things, Jesus doesn't like to admit it, because almost certainly they don't understand what it means. So Jesus, when he's asked that exact question through the gospel, is hesitant because it's asked by incompetent enemies. So here's another one. Are you the king of the Jews? And it's a little bit of irony, right? We should say, I think the answer is yes, because in the gospel we would say, is he the boss? Is he the son, descended from the son of David? Is he a king? The answer is, of course he is. In that sense, he's the rightful king of the Jews. But is he the king of the Jews like they expect? Does Jesus want his place? And that's what fellow Jews want, for him to go in there and take Pilate's place literally on the throne. So there's a constant irony throughout. So if he says, yeah, I am, he's got to, well, not like what you mean. Now in John's gospel, John unpacks that more, pulls him out in the back, and qui veritas, what is truth? And my true kingdom's not from here. If it were, my disciples wouldn't fight for me. He unpacks this little clever Greco-Roman thing, but not in the Synoptic Gospels. That doesn't happen. He answered.
Still happening in Gethsemane?
Oh, good question. No, Gethsemane was just a small region of the olive press. Now we're getting to what's called the Praetorium. This is the area where Pilate would. This is like a courthouse for Pilate.
In the city.
Yeah, they're back in the city of Jerusalem.
They're in Jerusalem.
Exactly right. Sorry, in Jerusalem. No, good question. Yeah, when they arrested him in Gethsemane, the end of 14, right before we picked up tonight, and the naked man fled.
Right.
They led him to the high priest, and that would have been inside Jerusalem.
Inside Jerusalem.
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. And you can go today. By the way, I said this on the. I've said a lot of this in the Matthew study because a lot of it's found in Matthew again, but you may not remember all that. But which is okay. Though if you're listening to my podcast, you're going to hear. Oh, again, he's telling the truth. You can go to the place of Pontius Pilate where he had his, you might say, his hearings, his throne. You can go to where the stairs were. You can see them today. You can walk on those stairs. And I've said it several times, but you don't remember it. It's just a fun story for me. My first time I was in Israel, you see all this ancient stuff, and a lot of modern stuff mixed with the ancient. And it's overwhelming to me, and I think it's a common experience. It's so much. You're just trying to take it all. It's like a sponge. It just kind of starts filling up. Like, I can't even take it anymore. It's so much facts. Like, that's Gethsemane. That's Gethsemane. Those trees are 2,000. Okay, look over here. It's just nonstop. Well, one of the things, we were at this modern building that was built on the side of this cliff, like a lot of them are. They're right there, and there's old stuff all around. there's ancient cement mangers, feeding troughs for horses that have been there for 2,000, 3,000 years. Are just sitting there next to a modern building with glass, and I was at this one building, and go on outside the building, there was a flat area, kind of like a balcony, and it was slanted by the ground that was slanted, and there was just old stone steps going up, and I noticed them. I'm like, no, whatever. I was looking around like, wow, look. And the guy comes out, one of the guys, and comes out and says, yeah, those are the stairs that went to da da da, and he describes it. And when he starts, I said, what did you just say? And he says it again, and yeah, those are the stairs that went to Pilate's Praetorium. This is the top of it. I said, you tell me those stairs right there, that's Jesus walking? And he goes, yeah. And I immediately started crying. I don't know why. There's something about thinking he walked through those stairs. Like, it's from here to the chair, man. I could go up there, and it was just over. It's just stone, but there's just something so special. Like that's what he did. He went up those stones. It's just crazy. If you can go, you need to go on the Sea of Galilee. Anyway, I'll stop talking. But anyway, it's just, I still think of that picture.
Was that in part of the temple, or was that like another building?
Good question. We're not exactly sure, but I think it would have been part of the Temple Mount. It's not inside the temple where they do offerings, but the Temple Mount, almost certainly. If you look at, there is a traditional spots. You can put them. You can find them in a lot of times maps. You can see what they think the office on my map has one right here or not. Anyway. Okay, so are you the king of the Jews? And he answered him, well, you've said so. And that's how it should be read in the Greek. Well, you've said that. You've said so. Instead of saying, I am the Messiah. He's not talking about Messiah in that sense now. Now we're talking to a guy who doesn't have a clue about, doesn't care about Messiahship. Even if he did, he understands Jesus would still have to go, wait. I'm not coming here to take over. That's not, I will, but not this way that you think I am. Because everybody you know of who's ever claimed a Messiah had a sword in their hand and would try to kill you. And Jesus obviously doesn't look like a madman in that sense. He doesn't look like a bandit or a terrorist. The chief priest accused him of many things. But he said this, he said this, you know. And Pilate asked him again, hey, do you have any answer to make? Exactly what the chief priest said. Look how many charges they're bringing against you. But Jesus made no further answer, so Pilate wondered. You defended yourself in court. Most people did in the entire ancient Roman system. And so Jesus, very well, it would have been normal for him to start saying, no, Your Honor, or whatever. Here's the case I'm going to make. Here's all my evidence. You know, so-and-so was there. I'll bring in witnesses. Jesus just keeps his mouth shut. Which doesn't make him look very guilty, but also not look very innocent because he's not defending himself. At the feast, he used to release for them one prisoner for whom they asked. Now, isn't that funny how Mark those in these little expressions every once in a while? He used to do that. Well, who's he talking to? I mean, this isn't Jesus. This isn't Pilate. That's Mark talking to his audience. He's talking to an audience that know anything about the tradition of the area, which is why he has to translate these Aramaic words and explain to them. Now, there is no other historical evidence in any literature we possess that he actually did do this at Pesach, at Passover. We do have evidence in Josephus and others that it was not uncommon to release him at other festivals. So again, it's not historically impossible he did it. It's not crazy at all. It's just we can't corroborate it. Outside of the Gospels, this is the only reference we have that he would do such a thing. And among the rebels in prison, rebel's a good word there. And if you were a Roman, you wouldn't call him a rebel. You'd call him a terrorist. It's very important to remember that. That's exactly how they would have perceived of Jesus and these people. He had committed murder in the insurrection. There was a man called Barabbas. Now, that might be the insurrection that occurred before when the Galileans were smashed by Pilate. He killed almost all of them several years before this time period. But Mark doesn't tell us, so he just assumes you know what happened. But he committed murder, and there was a man called Barabbas. Now, if you know your Aramaic, Bar means son, Abbas means father. When you put Bar in front of Abbas, it means son of the father. Son of a father, son of the father. And, of course, that's, irony. All right, so the point. This guy, the real son of the Abba, the father, is the one who called father, his Abba, in the garden. Well, no, he didn't call the garden. In Gethsemane when he says Abba, father. But there's a man there called Barabbas. And the crowd came up. Now here's the word for crowd. The last time the crowd was here, they were cheering because he entered in Jerusalem. And he began to ask Pilate to do as he wanted to do for them. That has led us to screaming out, we want this, we want that. He answered, do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews? Of course, the nickname. For he perceived that it was out of envy the chief priest had delivered him up. Notice how Mark kind of goes out of his way to make sure the Romans look good. It's the chief priests are the bad guys. That does fit a Mark in context of talking to primarily Roman Gentile Christians, that's for sure. But the chief priest stirred up the crowd to have him release for them Barabbas instead. The wrong son of the father is going to get released. And he said, then what shall I do with the man you call the king of the Jews? The crowd again, crucify him. And they shouted all the more. What evil has he done? Right, Pilate says, I'll just crucify him. He wants to satisfy the crowd, release from Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. Now, just a moment ago, I said the reason why the crowd does it is implicit, not explicit. But the implicit reason is because the crowd likes rebels who fight against Rome. Not characters who speak in parables and riddles and forgive sins and multiply bread and say, come follow me and eat this bread and drink this drink, and that's my body and blood. That's not what they want.
He was too complicated.
He's too complicated. Well, yeah, too complicated. And not what they wanted. Barabbas, yeah, he's a fighter. He fought. Jesus, that's right. He came in on a donkey. That's right. That's not what the crowd wants. I mean, I don't know how that could be more historically probable to me, that the crowd says, get rid of that dude. He's just causing us trouble. Barabbas, come back. He might train up some bandits. And remember, it's like releasing, kind of like, well, it is like releasing a Roman terrorist in their mind. And the Jews are like, bring him on, bring that guy down. He's worth being released. Jesus is not worth being released. So it's another indication the crowd, like the disciples, have eyes we do not see, ears we do not hear. They do not understand who he is. They don't get it. And Mark's version, but all the synoptics do this in John, that they put a lot of, they don't put any blame at all on the Romans, the Roman leadership, but the Jewish leadership. Soldiers led him away inside the palace, that is the praetorium, and they called together the whole battalion. Now, this whole next section might be one long, big, fat irony. And if it is, it's really amazing. Let me explain it very quickly. For a long time, Greeks and Romans had things called processionals. I spoke about this a little bit when Jesus entered the temple in Jerusalem, rather. Remember that in Mark chapter 11? He comes on the donkey. The processional comes with the idea that the emperor would come in who represented a god, say Dionysius. They would have this massive parade. They would come in with a big bull or multiple animals, typically a big bull. Someone would come up, and in pictures they have a person with an axe who's going to chop off the sacrifice, the bull's head, offer it to the gods, and then represent the god has come to the town. Big fanfare, and they would declare from the rooftops, they would shout out all these praises. Oh, that's great. Well, it died off for a while, but in this time period, around 20 BC and following, which is not too long after this, it became melded to where the emperors didn't represent the gods. They thought they really were divine themselves. They thought that when they came in, they were now representing, they are a deity. And these processionals work like this. You had the soldiers, and the praetorium would come early in the morning to get prepared for this processional come in. They would have and royalty wore purple. Other people didn't wear purple. The royalty did. They would have the crown. They would lead them all the way up to sacrifice the bull and shout out from afar. We'll see elements of that throughout this next narrative, but of course it's always ironic, every bit of it. So the praetorium is being gathered together, the whole battalion, but it's not because a real king in their mind is about to be established to demonstrate they've come into town, but something else. And so I'll just highlight some of those ironic parts, if it is supposed to be an irony of a Greco-Roman processional. They clothed him in a purple cloak, there's one, and they plaited a crown of thorns and they put it on him. A lot of people think, common belief is that thorns were put on him and it's stuck in his head to hurt him. That it's horrible and it shoves in every picture and it shows blood coming down his face. That's possible, but a lot of scholars also believe, and I won't call myself a scholar, but kind of, I'm one of them that doesn't believe that. In fact, instead, the thorns are things that stick out to not mock Jesus by making it hurt, but mock that he's not the king. Because one of the crowns that they would wear, and I'm sorry, at the top of mind, I can't remember the name now in Latin, but it was a crown that showed the rays of the sun. And you can see them all over Google Images and on the statues. I mean, you can look on pictures. And you've seen them before, I know you have, but it looks like these arrows jut out of them. It was a very common kind of thing. So a lot of scholars think that's what they're reproducing, not one that's shoved in his head at all, but one that showed like it's a mock version of these sun rays that royalty wore, the kings wore. We don't know for sure, but I tend to find that more convincing than I do that they just wanted something to stick on his head.
Been what they had that they could produce one with.
Right, like a pretend crown.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in my opinion, they're not doing this to hurt him, but to mock him. And they're different. They're different. That's. And they begin to salute him, "Hail, a king of the Jews," or "Hail, king of the Jews." Of course, that's the crime for which he's being punished now. That's the irony. The answer is, the response would be, if I had time traveled, said, well, he is, but not the way you think. So I'm glad you're hailing him. And then Mark likes the irony. So here's some just Roman guards being Roman guards, just punks. They're just doing what Romans do because they don't like the Jews anyway. In general, they don't. And they go, "Oh, yeah, whoa." They think they're being so clever. In fact, they are being clever because he deserves the purple and he deserves. So it's this constant irony, this double meaning beneath the surface. They strike him on the head with a reed. That's supposed to hurt. We're not told the thorns are supposed to hurt. But anyway, that's supposed to hurt. And they spit on him. They knelt down in homage to him. That is, of course, proskunonon means they worship. They bow down. They paid homage. It literally means the Latin is genuflect, from the genuflect, to bend down your knee, bow down. And, of course, it's all opposite day. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the purple cloth. It's all finished. They strip it off. They put his own clothes in him, and they led him out to crucify him. So in this scene in Mark's gospel, they hit him on the head, but notice there's no flogging. Do you see that? So in Mark's gospel, it's not like the Passion of the Christ, Mel Gibson, where he's going to the cross bloodied and nasty. He's been hit in the head. He's been hurt. I mean, that would not have felt good at all. But we don't have indication this lasted for hours and hours and hours because he's about to be crucified before it's like noon. So this all happening pretty fast. And the other Gospels, we learn that Pilate, in such an effort to not get Jesus killed because he's such a good guy, says, I'll just go beat him. How about we just basically punish him, we'll whip him, and that'll be enough, right? So he does that and comes back, and they still know we still want more. We still want more. They're bloodthirsty. Mark's Gospel, we don't have that extra narrative. They led him out to crucify him. And they compelled a passerby, Simeon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country. That means he's probably from North Africa, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross. Now, surely the only reason Mark put that in there is because Alexander and Rufus are known to the Markan community. Otherwise, it makes no sense to put this. Why would he make this up? It would mean that, and almost certainly, I'm convinced of it, in Mark's community, they know Alexander and Rufus. They're church members. That was his dad? Yeah, I was there. Which lets you know eventually, Simon probably eventually converted. And of course, then his kids did too. And now they're at church. And so he's, connecting some dots. I think that's pretty cool. Whatever happened to old Rufus? Alexander, I think it's pretty neat. To carry the cross. And they, of course, they don't mean it's not the literal cross. When you see pictures and audiences of people that, they're dragging the cross across town. No, it's the beam above, almost certainly, for a lot of reasons, but the beam above his shoulders. It's to help him. They brought to a place called Golgotha, which probably should be translated the place of the head, cranium. Skull's an old way of doing it, but head's probably better. If it is that, it's also an irony because when you had a Roman processional, it went to the top of a hill, Capitoline Hill, which is named after a place of a hill, of a head. And they had a prophecy about, because the legend is they found a head there. So this head and head analogy is probably, again, the irony of what a Roman processional leads to this mountain of a head versus no, Jesus is going to a different one. And it's known for this probably because the people died there so much. And they offered him wine mingled with myrrh, but he didn't take it. We're not sure how, well, anyway, historically probable, I don't know. A lot of people think this is to numb. This is not for numbing. We know from other Jewish literature, this was actually considered a delicacy. It's a very nice thing to have.
Kind of like your last meal.
Kind of like a last meal. But if it did occur, it almost certainly would have been some kind of irony thing. That is, let's say if you find wine while you're on the cross. Not they're trying to be gracious to him.
Kind of disrespect.
Yeah, disrespect him. That's how I read it. Just like the bowing down and, oh yeah, here's some champagne for your cross. I think that's exactly how we're supposed to understand it. Here's some champagne for you. And
I thought that myrrh may have had a sedating quality.
I've heard that myrrh might have that. I've heard that from laity. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know of any evidence for that.
That were true.
And it might be true. It might be true. I'm not a myrrh specialist.
Maybe it potentiates the wine,
Maybe.
like wine and, alcohol and other drugs. One of the-
Right, made it a little stronger. And it might have. It might have. In my interpretation, even if it made it stronger, I do not think for a second.
He wouldn't want that.
Well, I don't think Mark is trying to portray the Romans are trying to help Jesus out, if that makes sense. But I'm not saying you. Oftentimes that's how it's portrayed. Like they're trying to numb him up. He's being crucified for crying out loud. Give him a break. They're helping. They're giving him some anesthesia. I don't think at all we should be read it that way.
He wouldn't have wanted that anyway. If I understand, he wouldn't accept it anyway.
Right, verse 23. Yeah, he didn't take it. And they crucified him. Now, that one little quick phrase, they say a lot. They crucified him. They divided his garments among them, casting lots for them. Everybody knows what crucified is now these days, but you nail the hands, maybe the wrists, to a wooden peg, and then they would have carried him up on top of another peg sitting on the ground, and that's it. And he nailed his feet. We have one remnant of a crucified bone through an ankle bone that was found a few decades ago, and it proves it was through the ankle bone. So for everyone always thought that the feet would have been nailed like this in the pictures in front of the cross like this, which is possible. But the ankle bone demonstrates at least the person who was crucified, and that ankle bone, that guy ankles, it was on the sides of the cross. He's saddled, if that's the way you call it. So, but again, we don't know how often it was that way. So some people deduce and say, therefore, that's how it always happened. We don't have evidence for that. Well, but that is one. So either he straddled it, that's the word, straddled the sides left and right, and they nailed it to his right above his.
No matter who.
Yeah, it's horrible. Yeah, just horrible. Divide his garments, casting lots for them. You crucified people, it seems to have been to cause a person to have the slowest possible painful death. And it was a billboard to show this is what happens when you mess with Rome. Most Romans, in Roman history, it was typically illegal to crucify a Roman. It's very, very difficult for Romans to be crucified. It was saved for non-Romans and the worst of the non-Romans. And they would, as far as we can tell from literature and things like here too, they put it high up on hills, they put it outside the city gates, so as visitors and passerbys would see it. They wanted people to see it. I have some paintings I show all the time, pictures every time I preach or teach on this subject, because I like them and I think they get it better. We shouldn't picture a crucifixion. Sometimes you see this is way up in the air, it's 30 feet, and it takes a big fat ladder. There's no reason to assume that at all. Jesus would have been not far off the ground whatsoever. He's being crucified, not frozen in the atmosphere. Does that make sense? So,
Because it'd be more difficult for them to manage.
Yeah, difficult, yeah.
It just needs to be up off. the
Just
ground.
up off
You
the-
can't,
yeah.
Get any.
Yeah, he can't rest. He can't stand. That's
Yeah.
right. So they take his clothes, what's left over. The cast lots, of course, are playing games. He should take, and of course, verse 24 is almost verbatim from Psalm 22:19.
I find it curious that they take his clothes. I mean, why did they mention that? I guess to me does it have some significance? It wasn't like he had fine clothes. I don't
Right.
imagine.
Right, probably not. So why even mention taking his
Yeah,
clothes?
so
His
why-
garments.
I mean, it just seems such a insignificant.
Yeah.
I don't understand that.
Well, I'll tell you what the typical answer is. The typical answer is, why does Mark mention dividing the garments? Is just to demonstrate that this was divinely inspired. This was God's will, because he quotes from, like I said, Psalm 22:19.
It was prophesied.
That is, they're saying, yeah. So in other words, what typically is said by scholars is Mark made it up. He wanted to make it sound like Jesus was quoting from Psalm 20. Anyway, I'm not saying that you have to believe yourself, but that's the typical response. The other response would be is, we don't know, and they did it. But it's not crazy to think at all, even historically, they would have, whatever he had, that's a cloak or whatever.
Sounds
But
like it was almost an entertainment, though,
yeah,
for the city,
that was
which
part
is
of
sick. But
Yeah.
I just think it.
And
sort
that
of
was part
nice.
of their pay too, to have whatever they could get.
right. They could have kept whatever. Yeah.
But someone taught one time, I don't know if this is true, that Jesus had a cloak without a seam that Mary had woven for him. And I never heard of that anywhere in the Gospels
No, it's not.
or in the Bible.
Roman
Why would
Catholics. Roman
why
Catholic.
would they say that?
It fits a Roman Catholic tradition. If I recall, that's a Roman Catholic tradition that fits the idea that he had a cloak that they, of course, found. That it becomes a relic later on. Yeah, that's not in the Gospels anywhere, that's for sure. Maybe she did, but it's not in the Gospels. So it makes me...
Psalm 20,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
Psalm 22:18 says, "They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots."
That's it.
So it's like fulfilling Psalm. Yeah, prophecy.
And the Septuagint, the translation, is actually verse 19. But the English translation from the Hebrew is... Yeah, so I wish... I've always thought the same thing, whatever it's worth, is his clothes weren't much But they could have kept it whatever it is. But I theologically, on a narrative level, I do agree with Susan, which is it's to demonstrate the whole thing's making light of it. But whatever that's worth.
It's like Colosseum.
At the Colosseum entertainment, yeah. Verse 25, it was the third hour when they crucified him, and that's Roman time, so let's say it's around noon, and because he dies around 3 p.m. The inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews," and that inscription is why we think, most people do, that it was what we call lowercase t for the crucifixion of Jesus versus an X or a capital T for the crucifixion scene. But it probably was something right above his head that you could see the sign. And this titulus is what they call it. We get the word title from that. That's a Latin word. Would have gone around his neck, a placard, and that would have been with him as a criminal on his way to the crucifixion scene, and they would have taken it off and hung it above him. And we see that the King of the Jews, they would have seen it. Of course, it has in different languages, and now in other Gospels it emphasizes the different languages, and Mark it doesn't. And doesn't mean he didn't have the crimes. It means this is the crime for which he's being crucified. They wouldn't crucify him for being Messiah. Romans don't give a rip, right? It doesn't matter. He can be king anyway. So this would have been the crime that if you walk by Jesus' crucifixion, you said, why did he get capital punishment? Oh, sedition. That's it, sedition. He thought he could overturn a Roman governor. That's it. He was a terrorist.
So what was actually on the placard?
What? That you mean like in Greek?
Yeah.
Ha basileos ton hiodeon?
You see it in some churches, you'll see
Mhm.
what looks
It's
like
in Latin.
IHS.
Yes, go ahead. That's different, but yeah.
I can't remember what it means. It's,
Good. I did a podcast on that. In fact, I preached on one sermon. Yeah, IHS is actually, it's actually Greek for IES, and that's the first 3 letters of Jesus.
IES.
Yeah, it looks like a lowercase h.
Yeah.
That one, yeah, it's actually
IHS. It looks like
correct. And then that's actually, it's a long story.
IES.
Correct. It's those sounds. It's the first 3 letters of the name Jesus. Jesus. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I always got a funny feeling that Pilate made that sign to kind of frustrate the Jews, because they didn't like it saying that.
Oh, maybe.
Not just King of the Jews.
I'll make a sign to frustrate the Jews.
Yeah.
Maybe so, but maybe so. But maybe it's peripheral. We do know from other sources that it was common to put what's the word I'm looking for?
Accusation.
The accusation, the charge against the reason why I'm crucified. So I'm sure it frustrated them as well, but maybe a little bit. Again, but I don't know. I mean, if we were speculating, if I were time traveling, I've asked a Jew, does that really bother you? I mean, the dude's getting killed. I mean, he's getting.
Didn't Pilate kind of almost feel helpless? Don't you think, in a way?
Pilate feel helpless?
He washed his hands of it. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't want
I
to
mean,
do that.
Well, that's a different gospel. He washes his hands, but yes.
Yeah, okay.
And Mark's gospel, and Mark portrays him as being helpless a little bit, but he's afraid. He says afraid of the crowds, and so in that sense, there's a degree to which that's true.
scary crowds.
But again, when you join together Josephus and I can't remember if it's Tacitus, he's Roman, but there are a couple but Josephus and other sources talk about how Pontius Pilate really was kind of the armpit of the world. No one wanted to go there. He hadn't done a good job of the places. And this really was probably his literal last chance of any kind of Roman leadership. So in that sense, he probably had his hands tied a little bit. Like, I can't get these guys in a mob. It's Passover. I can't. I gotta ease tension. So in that sense, I think it's probably pretty true. Yep.
The reason I can never remember what IHS means is that when I was I have suffered.
That's interesting. I never heard that in my life. That's interesting.
Well, that was an Aunt Anna thing.
Yeah. Unfortunately, your sweet aunt was mistaken. But she's just, but no, that's sweet. That's sweet.
Mistake.
I'm sorry, everyone interrupted. I'm sorry. I thought you were about to say you see in Latin the anacronym. I thought you were going to say
I've
IN.
seen those things too, and I'm never sure what really was.
Well, you very often see INRI.
Yes.
Okay, that's the Latin way of saying habaselio tuneiodon. This is what I just said is Greek. The Latin is Iesu Nazaret Rex Iedus.
Okay.
Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. So INRI.
Okay. It's
I-N-I.
Jesus Nazarite.
So Jesus of Nazareth. Rex
And
Iedius.
Rex.
Rex is king. King of the Jews. I-N-R-I.
And I is for
That's Iedius, Jew.
Diegos.
Yeah, it's like Iosus, Jesus, that starts with an I. See, in Latin, there's no J. They start with E. So, I-N-I-R-I. That's very common, particularly Roman Catholics, right? Because they did Latin for centuries. So you'll see I-N-R-I.
Our church had the one with IHS.
IHS. Yeah, and that's just the real life of Jesus. So. I like that, though. Verse 27, they crucified two... What does your translation say there?
Robbers.
Robbers? What else? Anybody else?
2 rebels.
Yeah, mine says rebels.
Rebels just is simply better. Listis means something like bandit, rebel, terrorist. It can be used generally sometimes for someone who stole, but I don't think at all that's the point. Romans do not crucify thieves. They crucify bandits. These are terrorists, man. These are the very places that Peter and John really, really wanted. Was that Peter and John? Who's the last city to your left and right? I got the names confused now.
Songs and everything say that
James and John.
James and John. James and John.
So many hymns and everything say the thief.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The thieves on the cross. Yeah, they're just wrong. Yeah. Well, that's smart. Now, if you go to, I think it's Luke's gospel, the word there can be translated sometimes thief, but in general, I'm not sure. And we can talk about that if you want to later on. I think after the study, but that is not it. The synoptics, the major pour, certainly in Mark's gospel, it's not. They're not robbers.
So mine says rebels against Rome.
Rebels against Rome. Yeah, I like that. Again, it's like saying 3 wise men or 3 kings from the Orient. I mean, we have so many church legends that are just, they're just full of it. Yeah, I have always historically preferred terrorists because that captures how the Romans thought of them, and that's exactly why they crucified. Jesus is right in the middle of 2 people like that, and those who pass by derided, vitriol, whatever. They wag their heads saying, "Aha, you would destroy the temple and build in 3 days. Save yourself and come down from the cross." So even he never gets any love. Also, the chief priests mocked him one another with the scribes. He saved others, he can't save himself. There, of course, they do not mean. There's another example of like blasphemy and GD. At this time period, saved does not mean saved from our sins and not go to hell, as it became a real formalized way. It's not really until the early church started using the word saved, particularly the Apostle Paul, who turned the word saved from a more physical, tactile, haptic, food, shelter kind of stuff, until something much more spiritual. So here he means you've healed people. You've healed people from ailments before. Why aren't you doing it for yourself? You've rescued people from harm before. Why aren't you doing it here? Does that make sense? Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross. Of course, the irony, the answer is he is those things. They're trying to be sarcastic, but they're telling the truth. That we may see and believe. And that's exactly what we'd expect them to say, right? Because they demand a sign. But in the gospel, we see that when they believe who Jesus is, everything is possible to the one who believes. You'll see miracles in Mark's gospel if you believe it. If you don't believe it, remember he goes back to a small town. He says he could do only a few miracles there and a few healings. He said because no one believed him. The prophet's not without honor except in his hometown. So the very thing that demonstrates you don't know what the world you're talking about is when you say, "Come on down so we can see and believe." They should have flipped it. Having said that, a little quick footnote, because I always think this, because I often dialogue with atheists and skeptics. I've had a long conversation the last few days with one on Twitter. When we use the word believe and see and believe, it doesn't mean you believe blindly and just, I hope he's there. No. And like I said, in Mark's gospel, if you read it carefully, it's believe in him based on what they have seen and heard about Jesus. If that makes sense, it's not because he just fell from heaven and go, believe me. They go, okay. He's not demanding that. He's always trying to demonstrate there's proof in the pudding, as it were. They should believe what they've seen. That's why he tells the disciples, do you still not believe? They're on their boat, they're about to die. Like, what do I got to do, dummy? Those who were crucified with him also reviled him. Even the people who were getting killed. I mean, it's just crazy. Everybody turns on him. When the 6th hour had come, again, it's I lied earlier. I didn't mean to say. I said noon earlier. Crucified. He's about. Well, no, that's right. It's about noon now. It's about noon now. It was about 9 in the morning when he started. It's about noon now. It's about midday. Sorry, I misspoke when I said that. I didn't mean to. So it's about noon now. There was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. So there we go. So about noon to 3 in the middle of the day, there's darkness. Basically, shortly, if you are a Greek, Roman, or Jew, you expect that when great people die, what we would call lunar or solar things, they would call cosmic things happen. It was standard belief. They thought when Caesar died, when Nero died, when all these major emperors died, they would say, their ancient Roman authors would say, some big thing happened. Darkness covered the earth. There was a big earthquake. And so they expect that if a person's great, there's going to be, the cosmos will react to it. And so you don't have to be Jewish to believe that, though there's Jewish beliefs about that too, but it would have demonstrated something. At the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. And of course, since Mark's audience doesn't speak Aramaic, he has to translate to Greek. My God, why have you... Did your translation say what? Why have you not forsaken me? Why have you forsaken me? I prefer... And forsaken's fine. I prefer... Deserted me? Okay, that was fine too. I prefer... it's a little idiomatic in my expression, but I think it's right, which is, why have you not rescued me? And I'll tell you exactly why now I prefer that. And I said that in the Matthew study, but it's worth repeating. I think it's worth repeating. Why have you done that? Now, Jesus is clearly quoting from Psalm 22:2. In Psalm 22, we have this incredible psalm of the psalmist, whoever wrote the tune, is just desperately seeking God. God seems so far off. Why have you seem so far off, and so forth. As the song goes on, it gets more optimistic. I will praise you because you're going to save me, no big deal. And it's very common amongst church circles to say Jesus was trying to evoke the whole psalm, not just the sad part. I find that very unconvincing. Most scholars do. But in the church, it's very popular to say, no, he didn't really mean God the Father's left him. He's just trying to evoke the whole psalm, and it ends very hopeful and happy. They might be right, and I might be wrong. They might be. I don't think so at all. I think if Jesus wanted to quote any part of the psalm he wanted to, he would have quoted it, and he did. And the one he quoted was, my God, why have you abandoned me? Why have you forsaken me? Or I think is, why have you not rescued me? And if you go, for example, like Hebrews chapter 5, 7-10, real quickly, if you don't have it, I can. Hebrews 5, you see this kind of idea. In the days of his flesh, that means during Jesus' ministry, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death, and he was heard for his godly fear. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered, and being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him, being designated by God a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. So even then, references an early church reference. This is outside the Gospels, the only one I know of in the New Testament that references Jesus going to the cross and praying up prayers and being sad and so forth. But in Mark's Gospel, he didn't say all that, but he does crying out. The author of Hebrews doesn't say, and we knew that Jesus sure was happy in the end of it all. The author of Hebrews' entire point is, he suffered miserably and was still faithful. And that's the book of Hebrews' entire point is, you Jews who are abandoning your Christian faith are wrong. Jesus is the example of how to go through horrible suffering and fulfill the will of God. My own view is exactly what Mark's point is. That Mark has Jesus quote from this, whether he historically did or not, I don't know, I think he probably did, but he deliberately is trying to point out the fact that even Jesus and the fact of horrible suffering and agony still went all the way through. Now, let me say a few more things about that, if I may with you. The reason why I think rescue is the best idea is because in my experience, 100% of the time when I've heard people preach and teach on this, even for very educated people, this is oftentimes used as a text to say, it's at this moment that Jesus bore the sin of the people in the world, and so he got cut off by God the Father. They would say God is what they would say. And this is where he felt all the sin of the world. And so he felt God's forsakenness, and every single sermon I've ever heard on Lent, Ash Wednesday, Good Friday, whatever, says that over and over. The problem is completely false. Christians never taught that Jesus bore the sin of the world while he was being crucified. It was when he died. Well, Jesus It's not a dead man talking. He's quite alive while he's saying these words. This is not the moment. So that's completely false when the New Testament is that his death is what is part of the saving process for us, not his cry of dereliction is what they call it. The second major problem with that is that it assumes really bad theology that Jesus, the Son, became separate from God, the Father. There became this, we would call ontological distinction. That's real bad theology. The idea that Jesus, the Son, could somehow part ways with God the Father goes against everything Christian theology has ever taught, ever. And I've heard people preach sermons, do lessons, trying to reconcile all those things. Well, no, they're different persons, different, you might say, centers of consciousness, God the Father, God the Son, the Spirit. That's true. But Jesus can't stop being God-kind while on the cross, theologically seen. Now, Mark is not talking about what I'm talking about right now. I'm saying the second major problem was saying Jesus has been cut off and abandoned by God is you have horrible theological ramifications for saying that. So my first point is, it goes against what the New Testament actually says. This is when he's took all the sin in the world on. No, that's not what it says. He's still talking, he's not dead. 2, has horrible theological ramifications. Does that make sense so far? I'm not done yet, but I just make sense so far? Go ahead. Big breath. You're being here so far. Okay. So
Because I've heard so many sermons.
for so many, me too.
When he died is when the curtain split in the temple.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, see, there's a manifestation of his death. He will breathe his last, then the temple will be torn. That's exactly right. Then he's dead. He's not dead right now.
Okay, so you're saying that it wasn't until the actual death, but is
Saying the New Testament says that, correct?
okay, but
Yeah.
when he is so
I don't interrupt you, but yeah. So good. Thank you. You just cited a lot of things I've heard all my whole life. But let me respond slowly to them. I try. Good. Paul says so the two major things. I won't go on forever. Two major things. One is this is really as good. The first is sin on or in or whatever. The second is the issue of you can't look on sin. The first part is, as Paul says specifically, and if you trust Paul, know what he's talking about, and I do. In Romans 3 and Philippians 3, he says that God the Father condemns sin in the flesh of Jesus. He didn't condemn Jesus. I have never heard that done correctly by a non-specialist.
Okay.
I've only heard non-specialists say it wrong. That God the Father condemned Jesus and he stood in our place and he was punished for our... That's not what it says. I think they read Isaiah 53, he was punished for our iniquities, and think that he was somehow beat up on. That's not what Paul says at all. He condemns sin in the flesh of Jesus. How that works, go for it. You guess is mine. It doesn't say. At some level, somehow, Jesus, as it were, swallowed up, or sin, they personify it, like sin is a thing, an object, or a being that Jesus takes within himself. That gets condemned. That gets condemned. Colossians says I'm going for a long time. But he condemns sin in the flesh of Jesus. So that's the first thing. He doesn't condemn Jesus. He condemns the sin. So Jesus knowingly, willingly does that for himself. But the second major thing is there's one reference in the entire Bible that says God can't look at sin. I've heard that my entire life. It's from Habakkuk. I think it's Habakkuk 2:4. I remember now. It's off the top of my head now. I know it's Habakkuk. And it's one time. And Habakkuk says, he's talking in a context. He's talking to a bunch of sinners. He's telling them to stop and repent. And he's speaking of God, and he says, because we know you can't look upon sin. That's it. So, frankly, I think the idea that we take that verse and apply it to all conceivable notions of God and theology, I don't find that convincing. What I do, I read that in context and go, it sure seems to me, I would even use the word clearly, but to be humble, that Habakkuk just means you people should stop sinning. God can't look upon that nonsense. Stop. Does it really literally mean God the Father becomes blind? It can't mean that. He doesn't have eyeballs. He can't not look, nor can he look. He doesn't have eyeballs. These are metaphors for being in the presence of. If that's what all it means, which I'm sure that's all it means is, that's good old Testament theology. Right. Humans can't have sin in them and on them in Jewish theology and be in the Holy of Holies in the temples. Yep. That's why we have offerings and sacrifices for most sins, not all. basically unintentional sins. And that's why you have ritual purity. That's all Habakkuk is saying. But what I've heard preached and taught for years and years is God kind of becomes like nose blind. He just all of a sudden, wait, where'd Bo go? He's sinning. I lost track of him. Oh, there he is. He asked for forgiveness. Or David, I'll pick him myself. I just don't think, I think it's not. So when you tie in Habakkuk, one verse in Habakkuk, which it always is, right, with the cross of Jesus, he must be dying. His sin must be on upon him. Now he's separate from God the Father, and he feels God forsaken us. Nothing in this text tells how he feels. The text doesn't tell us how he feels. He says, my God, why haven't you? And that's why I do prefer the translation, why haven't you rescued me? We might surmise, he must feel confusion. He's inquiring as to why this happened, but that's not how it's preached. It's preached as this agonizing breach with God the Father because of all the my sin and your sin. That's why he feels horrible. Okay, but not in Mark. It's not that way. So,
But he knew this was going to happen.
Jesus, the Father, Son, and Spirit knew this was going to happen. Absolutely. Well, okay. You asked that before one time, and I said what I'll say again, which is maybe in Mark's gospel, he knows he will be handed over and killed.
But he doesn't know details.
We don't have evidence that he knew the details.
Okay.
We don't have evidence of that. When you get to Matthew and Luke, then they start things like "and be crucified." It gets specific. Most scholars say Jesus didn't say that. The gospel writers who knew the story so well said that's what's going to happen to him. But in Mark's gospel, we're not sure how many details he knew. So I'm not saying he didn't. I'm saying Mark doesn't tell us how many details that he knows. But he, in Mark 8:31, 9:31, 10:33, 35, he knows he's going to be handed over, beaten, and killed. And on the third day rise. Unless you say, nope, Mark just made all that up. He just a prediction, and some scholars do that. Okay, I don't. But anyway.
So is it okay to like that?
Is it true that God can't tolerate sin and he won't bless those who sin? The first one I have no problem with. I think biblical Old and New Testament, it's very easy, in my opinion, it's very easy to say God doesn't tolerate sin. I think he takes sin very, very seriously.
So that's better than saying he can't look upon sin. He just won't tolerate.
He can't tolerate sin. I do think that's I think I could drum up hundreds of verses that say he's not like, that's okay, no big deal. Never mind, I changed my mind. He hates it. But the second thing makes me nervous, and I'm reflecting on it. I haven't had time to think about too much. The second part when you said, and he won't bless those. My only concern with that would be, is if you mean, if a person ever sins, will God not show favor upon them? In that sense, I would say, well, no, because Christians certainly can sin, and God can show his favor upon them, or you might say, you use the word bless. If a person who is not a disciple of Jesus and consistently sins, will God not bless them? Then my response to that is, maybe, maybe not. Right, I would say is God can if he wants to, but he sure doesn't have to.
So the fellowship is broken. The relationship is broken.
The relationship is broken between whom?
Between the believer and God the Father, if there is sin in the life of the believer.
Well, good. So the relationship broken between a believer and God, the relationship is broken if they sin. Yeah, that's such a good question. Maybe I need to do a podcast. I've always heard that my entire life. I've even kind of said it, but I've heard all my life that when Christians sin, it really messes up the relationship between you and God the Father. I just don't know any biblical evidence for that.
I don't think Paul thought that.
And here's why the man's face like her jaw dropped. Well, he said, I don't think Paul thought that. But the reason why is maybe I can go back and find a couple of verses, but off the top of the cusp of my head, I can't think of anything. When Paul, particularly in Ephesians and some in Colossians, but Paul and those later documents, he prefers to use the word adoption. We've been adopted as his sons. He doesn't. If he believed it, he didn't say it, that our adoption is at stake when we sin. Does that make sense? And so when it comes to relationship, to use Paul's metaphors, he uses judicial ones. We have been acquitted. We're now righteous. We are now also use adoption language. He uses other language, but I can't think of any example where in the New Testament any New Testament author says that our relationship with God is at stake. We've sinned.
I don't believe that you lose your salvation.
Okay, but I mean, your question was, is relationship?
The relationship is not going to be as smooth given it up and
Gotcha.
to yourself.
I'll say this quickly and move on to Susan, and I'll move on because I won't keep hogging the time on that one. No. So my view on the relationship part, and this is why, and maybe I'll change my mind tomorrow, but so far in my life, the reason why I don't have a problem with saying sin affects your relationship with God is not because the New Testament teaches it, but because I found it to be a logical corollary of how I feel.
Yeah.
So in a psychological state, I feel as if my relationship is off. That's it. That is, and I do think that's true. For example, the Bible never teaches us to ask for forgiveness once we've been forgiven by Jesus. It never says that. The only thing that comes close to it is in Jesus' model prayer when it says, forgive us, we forgive it. All right. But that's before his death and resurrection. Post-resurrection, we're never told to ask for forgiveness. Even in John the Elder specifically says, little children, I write to you that you do not sin. But if you do sin, you have an advocate with Christ Jesus, the righteous one. Another time he says, if you do sin, confess your sin, and he will forgive you of all unrighteousness. I'm so short paraphrase of it. He doesn't say, ask for forgiveness, and he will forgive you. The basic assumption in New Testament theology is we've been forgiven. You don't keep asking for it. Pagans ask for forgiveness. Converts ask for forgiveness, not Christians. You've been forgiven. Stop asking for it. But people come to me and say, well, does that mean I can never ask for it? No. Sure, I think psychologically it has a powerful effect. It has a meaning sometimes. There are times everything in me wants to say, God, please forgive me. And I go, no, I've been forgiven. Part of me still goes, but God, still please forgive me. It just feels good to ask the question. That's how I feel about relationship with God, is that sometimes I might say it helps the relationship that way. I just don't know any biblical precedent to argue that. Okay, I'll stop. Yeah, I'm saying too much. Go ahead,
I
Sue.
think the reason that there's a,
Yeah, all we have to do is turn back. He comes toward us, but we have to come to him. Okay, again, but the reason why I find that problematic is because, well, several things. One is I can't find that in the New Testament anywhere, anything you just said. And so it doesn't mean it's false. It just means that I don't know anywhere in the New Testament where it says that. So I would say maybe, but so when we turn back, we ask for forgiveness. Maybe, except that in the New Testament, Christians are never told to do that. We have no instance anywhere in the New Testament where Christians use the word turn their back. In the New Testament, when a person literally needs to turn to Christ, they use the Greek word for turn or from. It was always used for non-Christians to becoming a Christian. It was what we would call conversion language every single time. When Paul said in Thessalonians, y'all are my Thessalonians, turn from your false gods. He's praising them that they have turned from their idols to a true and living God. That word we might say they converted, but that's fine. But Christians are never told to do that. Christians are never told to repent, ever in the New Testament. The closest you get is Revelation, and I think that's on purpose.
but you know,
Hyperbole.
sometimes people
Can put on blinders. Yeah, well, maybe.
We're
But that
supposed
so.
to go talk to them about that.
That's when they needed help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my first major point is the New Testament never says the way you said it, and I've always heard that so many times. Christians can turn their back on God and all that, and my response is maybe the Bible doesn't say it. At least I can't see it so far. My second major response is my concern always, and maybe not at all in your heart and mind, is when I grew up, particularly in Baptist world, when I grew up, that vocabulary was used a lot. It evokes a status with God that I'm convinced is false. My status with God, the Father, Son, and Spirit, is not based on some love, peer-to-peer relationship. It's based on a covenant that God, He made through Abraham, through His people, and accomplished through Jesus on my behalf. And for me, I'm not being mean. For me, one of the major dangers, the first is not the New Testament. The second is when we use words like relationship so much and back and turning back and going back, it I think can implicitly describe a kind of relationship status with God that we simply do not possess. We don't possess it. And it evokes, and I've heard well-intentioned people, then it brings other things like, He's mad at me right now, He's upset about it bringing this like human relationship metaphors a whole lot that I just don't find in the New Testament.
It makes me think of the prodigal son story.
Yes.
Okay, the prodigal son story.
And I think that's where.
Down the road to find.
Right.
And I think people, I think people use the prodigal son.
Gotcha.
They They
Gotcha.
substitute their relationship with God like the father did with his prodigal son in return.
That's a great point. You're probably exactly right. So to go right to Luke 15 and the so-called prodigal son, which is a horrible title for it, should be called the loving father. It's not about the son. But okay, my response to that would be you're probably exactly right. It's probably where it comes from. People read that and go, "Oh, the father and son," and embrace them. And I preached a sermon, but that's not the sermon I preached because that's not Jesus' point in Luke. At least it's not Luke's point. It's not Luke's Jesus' point. The point he's making by the parable is not that's how it is with Christians and God. The point of the entire parable is it starts out by people who are challenging him. Jesus is responding to Jewish authorities who hate the fact that Jesus is offering repentance and belief in the kingdom of God to non-pious Jews, those dirty sinners, quote-unquote sinners out there. And he says, let me tell you a story. It's about this guy went out. So the point of the story is, he says, that's what like when one sinner repents. So that's not to Christians. It's just not. It's to people in the early first century context of Jesus' ministry, of the audience that certain Jews hated that he preached to them and had table fellowship with them. And he says, those are the very kind of people that need to hear the gospel. God is happy to receive them as if this wayward son came back who was spitting his father's face and gave him a big fat hug. So it is not indicative, in my reading, that parable is not indicative of the life of a disciple of Jesus.
Well, what I always go back to it.
Yeah, well, we've talked some of that. We may move on. I don't think Paul thought you could lose your salvation like you lose your car keys. Paul, and that's why I never use it, because lose your salvation never appears anywhere in the Bible.
No,
And that's another expression that Christians have always used.
People use,
Right.
especially Baptists.
They do, and I always tell my Baptist kindred friends, why do you say that? The Bible never says. In other words, why make a big deal of something the Bible never even says? Pick a Bible verse, let's talk exegesis, but don't make up terms and make up expressions that don't make any sense.
Adoption was a permanent.
Absolutely.
First.
Right, but I do think that's Paul's point. To be adopted means the child didn't have authority and status to say, we're going to do this, son. The father just, you're mine. And I think that's Paul's point. Absolutely. I don't think the point is the permanence, but rather who initiated, who did all the work. Right.
Maybe. Okay.
That's why I read that.
I'm sorry.
No, well, I hope this is helpful. If not, maybe one person on the podcast, they'll find it. It's helpful to me. It's helpful to me. It was helpful to me. So why did he say, why have you rescued me? Why did Jesus say that? Well, you can answer for yourself. Why did he say, why have you rescued me? My own view is that Jesus never got an answer to his prayer request. That's my view. My view is that the last time he talked to God the Father was when he was saying, please take this cup from me. And Jesus held out hope that he was going to answer the prayer. And then Jesus said, why haven't you done it? And in short, this why, Eloi, Eloi, is God, why didn't you answer the question the way I wanted? We know from Gethsemane that Jesus would still have been, quote, happy with the outcome, which is, as long as God's will is getting done, I denied my will, but he still wants to know why. Why this way? That's good. That's why I like how Sharon Dowd says, she goes,
Jesus did.
Sharon Dowd says the commentator, she's so good. Her commentary reading Mark is so good. But she said, surely this encouraged the first century Christians who might have been tortured and suffered almost to the point of death and couldn't hold up. That is, they're still being tortured for the faith, but they're not happy about it. They're crying out to God, why in the world do I got to go through this? But they're still doing the right thing. And that's just to me, that's sobering. But I agree, yeah, why God? Yeah, Jesus did it. Yeah.
We, not to the extent they did back then, but we still
Yeah.
are kind of persecuted today.
So he went all the way in. So I think the answer you have your own answers. I mean, of course. But my view is that he asked the question because he really thought God the Father. To the bitter end, I did a sermon on this, but there was a guy, Rhodes, and is it Ritchie? There's a book that was a big watershed in Markan studies called Mark as Story. And they read the gospel as narrative critics, not as biblical exegetes. And it is so insightful. And they make the point, it was just so good. It's one of those things, I love it when you read it and go, I never saw it that way. And they talk about the narrative, how it builds all this tension constantly, because when Jesus asks this prayer, C.S. Lewis alluded to this in his book, Letters to Malcolm, chiefly on prayer, but Rhodes and Ritchie do the fantastic. He asks this prayer request, and he says, come on now, for I forget it. Well, we don't know if he's got to answer the prayer yet. He's still busy praying, but the guys come to arrest him. So you think, okay, maybe God's going to answer his prayer request by the mob not working out. It does work out, Judas. Judas betrays him. Well, maybe he'll go to the Sanhedrin, and they'll say it didn't work out. And you think it's supposed to not work out because no one agrees. They can't agree together. Like, God is going to answer his prayer. He's not going to work out. I'm waiting to hear to say, I was going to do this along the way, but then come to find out, he does get charged. Well, now I go to Pilate. Here's another chance. Maybe it won't work out. So he's going up the ranks to Rome. He says, you're not saying anything? And it says, and he was bewildered. Pilate was just confused, like, oh, that's weird. You're thinking, all right. And Pilate's going to the bitter end. Okay, I'll let Barabbas. Who do y'all want? You think surely anybody, this whole gospel would have been on the side of Jesus, it would have been the crowds. Nope. The first time in the entire gospel they turn on Jesus, it's when he needed them the most. They turn on him. So the disciples abandoned him, the Jewish leadership abandoned him, the Roman authorities abandoned, the crowds abandoned, and the last person possible is God the Father. So you're holding out hope this whole time, the prayer that it's going to be answered, and it never does. And that's why many people call Mark's gospel, it links a lot with an ancient tragedy, ancient Greco-Roman tragedy. That the major character and hero of the story dies a tragic death. And Mark has deliberately painted it that way. He's done it many times. If you want to be my disciple, you must pick up your cross and follow me. This is what it looks like to be a Messiah person. This is it. There's no way around it. It's not pretty at all. This is not about your best life now, every life of Friday, just be on the bright side all the time. That is not Mark's portrayal. Matthew's a little different, Luke's a little different still, and John's quite different. Mark's gospel is ringing loud and clear that you end, when you're faithful, you might be ending at the very end saying, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. But you do it. And it's also not the end of the story. We're not there yet, but it looks like it, all right? So we did answer his question. Some think he's calling Eliah, right? Eliah, or you say Elijah from the south. Eliah, because it sounds like Eloi in Aramaic. In Hebrew, it's Eli, but you might say Eli. Matthew has the Hebrew version. The Gospel of Matthew, it's not Eloi, Eloi. He says Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. To realize why Eloi doesn't sound like Elijah, but he would have said it in different language. Okay, I'll keep going. So they're wrong. He's not Elijah, right? We know that was John the Baptizer kind of character. One ran and filled a sponge of vinegar, put on a reed, gave it to a drink, and said, let's see if Elijah's going to come take him down. They're all just still making fun of him. Jesus uttered a loud cry and breathed his last. That's when Jesus dies, verse 37. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Josephus says there was a massive, it's my word, massive, but it must have been a very large, thick cloth curtain that was right on the outside the outer doors of the temple. I think he called it the what did he call it? Not the firmament. Picture of the firmament? No, the picture of the something. But basically, it probably looked like stars. What we call it constellations. This very, very ornate star curtain in front of it, and that's what's ripped. Now, the last time something was torn in two was the heavens, all the way back to Mark chapter, is that 1:11 or something? Remember, Jesus looks up and the heavens were split open, they're torn open, and the Spirit comes down and says, "My Son," blah, blah, blah. So obviously in both scenes, we're supposed to see this. God the Father splits open the heavens. That's revealing, that's apocalyptic. It's revelation in the baptism. Here it's happening again. God the Father's doing the initiating. He's ripping open the stuff. So he's initiating this from top to bottom, and almost certainly it's supposed to signify two things. One is it's further judgment on the temple that Jesus said was coming. He's ripping it. It's no longer like ripping a piece of paper. It's now void. The second thing is when you knock down the curtain, it didn't just block people on the outside. Jews would have thought is it blocked the Spirit on the inside. Now the Spirit's freed out to all the people. So it's let loose. It's probably the assumption. But Mark didn't tell us exactly the significance, but that's standard scholarship, at least whatever that's worth to you. And the centurion says something that clearly he did not mean. This is supposed to be ironic. Here's a normal Roman centurion guard who just saw a guy got beat up and killed, crying out, "God, save me!" And he dies and goes, "Shh." He dies a pathetic, old, horrible death, and he says, yeah, truly, this guy was the Son of God. Surely he was the Messiah. Woohoo! Of course, that's the irony, is he was. In Mark's gospel, the only way to truly recognize he's the Son of God is to see him appropriately through the lens of the cross. But if you're not his disciple and you've not been following him along the way, you won't get it. You'll think he's been defeated. That's exactly what the disciples think. They all think he's defeated. That comes explicit in the other Gospels. They say that. Luke 24, the walk to Emmaus, we thought he was the one to restore Israel. I mean,
So you think he's saying that sarcastically?
Absolutely, I do.
I always thought that was
Like a conversion
a
point.
conversion
Yeah,
point.
I've always heard that preached too. Yeah, I don't know if any scholar in the world is going to agree with that. I know it's a common, and they may be the right. That's common lessons in sermons. They go, in the last moment, they go, and I've always, I'm not making, well, I'm being silly. I'm trying to make fun of it. I've heard pastor preachers try to make sense of it. They go, they must have looked up and realized glory shone about. I mean, just make up something. Like, why would he convert on the spot? I've always thought because he didn't. He did. There's no conversion. Mark has been thick with irony from top to bottom, especially in the Passion narrative. And there's no conceivable way a Roman historian would have converted on the spot by a criminal he just killed. He just killed him. There's not a lick of, there can't be a lick of honesty in this.
I always thought he was reacting to the darkness that happened
The ripping of the curtain,
And-
the veil,
and the earthquake.
Well, there's no earthquake in Mark. That's in
No,
Matthew.
not in Mark.
Yeah, and he's not at the temple. He wouldn't have seen the temple torn.
Right.
At worst, he was seeing the darkness, and that's true.
Still, the ground would have been shaking if you combine the Gospels.
Well,
I don't-
Sure.
I don't do that.
Sure, if you combine them all together, sure. Yeah, but in Mark's gospel, he doesn't. Well, I think I hear you.
Yeah.
Just in Mark's, the only thing I might find convincing what you just said is verse 33. Is it conceivable that this man saw the darkness and said, "This is an omen of a special person"? I get it, absolutely, and I hear you there. My humble opinion is that's not enough for me to push me over the edge because Mark has been so thick with irony from Romans, literal Romans, not the book of Romans, but from Romans. They're put in a good light.
Yeah.
They say the right things. Are you the king of the Jews? Oh, this is the Son of God. But in context, and Mark, they don't know what they're saying, and they always get it wrong. So if that's true, and if what you're saying is true, and the typical preacher response is, this is the one time in the entire gospel an enemy of Jesus gets it right. Ever. Or it's not a time and they always get it wrong, and it fits the pattern perfectly. And maybe that's the way it is.
So, because it says, standing right in front of him, saw the way he breathed his last. He said, truly this man was the Son of God, with like an exclamation point. So it's like, what about seeing the way he breathed his last?
Well, to me, that's what makes it irony. He just dies a pathetic criminal. And you have exclamation point. Of course you do, because your translators want to be because they think he converted. Surely he's a... That's not what the Greek says. In the Greek, there's just...
Why is
yeah.
it not okay to put together the things that Matthew said along with the things that Mark said?
It's a sin, Vanna. Yeah, good. No, seriously, that's a good question. I think when I first started, I alluded to that. But that is, so why is it not good to bring Matthew and Luke and basically harmonize? Why is it not good to do that? My response is, in general, it's not bad to do that. In general, it's not bad. I believe, and anybody who's been trained like me believes, and you don't have to believe, that when Mark wrote his gospel, he did not consult Matthew or Luke or John or any other person that we know of literarily. He might have had oral traditions from some of these people, which means when Mark wrote it, historically, if it time traveled, it means it's very unlikely he wanted his audience to think of anybody else. Almost certainly, if the timing is right, Matthew's gospel did not exist, Luke didn't exist, John didn't exist, and so there's just Mark. Now, right, and there are about 20% of scholars who think Matthew is first, but most think Mark is first, and I think Mark is first. Having said that, if it's true that Mark's gospel is first, then no other gospel existed. Almost certainly, there's no indication that any other gospel existed. There might have been a written collection. Well, I'll get bogged down, but no gospel as we know it. This probably is the very first one. Having said that, which means Mark would not have wanted you, Vanna, or me to smuggle in everyone else's. Mark would have said, if I wanted you to think about Matthew and Luke's versions, I would have put it in there. But he doesn't know about them. He wants you to hear his particular indication. So my response is, why is it not always good to do it? Is because I want to hear what Mark has to say for Mark's reasons. And then when Matthew does Matthew, I want to hear Matthew, what he says specific in Luke. In just a second, I've tried to do it throughout the gospel. In just a second, I'm going to give you another example why it matters to hear it just the way Mark says it. Because Mark's making very particular points that if we smuggle in, we might misread it. My second major point I'd say is the reason why it's not all bad to do that is I'm a Christian. And so those are my authoritative texts. And so if someone asks me on a systematic level, can you recreate what you think happened to Jesus? Well, then we might piece together certain things. Okay. And I will preach from the different texts. And I mean, they're scripture and authoritative. But if someone says, what do you think Mark thought? I'm only going to quote from Mark. If someone says, what do you think John? I'm only quoting from John. And it is drilled in our DNA to be atomistic about it in our scholarship PhD level. You can never, ever, ever, ever quote from another gospel unless you were saying to compare it or contrast it. They'd get very, very upset if I said, well, I'll tell you things. But anyway, and they said, well, remember the earthquake? One time a professor fussed at me because I said Garden of Gethsemane. That's not what Mark says. Mark didn't say that. He got off the region. The Greek word is region of Gethsemane. Matthew says garden. She says, it's not a garden. I go, what? I mean, I never thought of my entire, everyone said, she goes, it's not a garden. I go, no, she goes, it does not, Mark never said that. And she's exactly right. Mark never said that. So don't say it. But I mean, that kind of stuff was just drilled. It's not there. What does the text actually say? So put your feet to the coals, as it were. If you listen to this podcast, you go, man, that sounds horrible. Bless his heart. You can send me money to David Pendergrass. I'm just kidding. Feed the children and the starving. No, that's just a bad joke. It doesn't matter. In the church, does that mean you go to hell if you quote from? No, it doesn't. My goodness. No. You can do it. I'm being picky for a Mark study. That's the short answer. They were also women looking on from afar, among whom were Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James the younger, and Joseph and Salome, he was in Galilee, followed him and ministered to him. So they served him. That one little quick thing there, and ministered to him. Do you have ministered? Is that what you have? Good. Diakonon, it gets the word cared for his needs. That's good. The word from the Greek there is the word because you know Greek words. You don't know you do. It's deacon. It's the one who's a servant. We might use the word waiter or waitress. They were in that sense, not in an office deaconesses, but that's right. They were serving him from afar. We have exact references to that, like in Luke chapter 8, verses 1 and 2, when it says out of the money, the women helped pay for the needs of Jesus and his disciples. So here we have an example. See, I just quoted there from Luke to corroborate this. But anyway, so they follow him, but they follow him afar. From a distance, and also many other women who came up with him in Jerusalem. So here's a flock of women who come to care for him from a distance. When evening had come, since it was the day of preparation, that is the day before Shabbat, of course that is Friday, and this is another example here where Mark's version makes Mark's version, and everybody reads into Mark what Mark never says. In fact, Mark tries to do what everyone doesn't do for Mark. They read Matthew and Luke and John into Mark. Mark presents a picture of Joseph of Arimathea that's very specific. Joseph of Arimathea, a respected member of the council. Remember, in Mark's gospel it says, and they all condemned him. That means in Mark's text, Joseph of Arimathea was part of the council that condemned Jesus to death or to send him off to Pilate. He's a bad guy in Mark. He is not a good guy in Mark. He's a little bit better guy in Matthew. He gets to be a really good guy in Luke and certainly in John. By the time you get to John's gospel, he's a secret disciple. Or at least maybe by Luke's gospel. Not in Mark's gospel. Mark's gospel, Joseph is a bad guy. Who also himself, looking for the kingdom of God, took courage and went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. We are probably supposed to read that as kept on looking for the kingdom of God. That is, it ain't Jesus. It ain't Jesus. Jesus came to usher in.
But he wants to bury him.
He wants to bury him because that's exactly what devout Jews are supposed to do. And the only reason he wants to bury him whatsoever is because it's exactly what it says you're supposed to do in Deuteronomy 21, 22, 23. That whenever a body is hung on a tree, I mean anything, any kind of, whether they hung literally from the neck or they're crucified, whatever, before Pesach, before Passover, they're supposed to be put in a tomb. Or, in Deuteronomy, it says it will defile the land. This is for self-serving purposes. That dude's got to get off the cross now. The other two guys aren't dead yet, but Jesus is. And praise God for him, because he had been buried 3 different bodies. At no time does that mean he loves the other 2 bandits if they'd been dead. Jesus is the only one who died so far. There's no on the cross. The other guys on Passover still be on the cross, apparently. But Jesus is off, and so he's being a devout Jew. That's all this is. That's it. He asked for the body of Jesus. Pilate wondered if he were already dead, and summoning the centurion. If he were already dead, you hear the word dead, and you see his sermon of already dead, then the body. Mark's trying to emphasize he's a corpse by this point. He's trying to emphasize it. He learned from the centurion that he was dead. There it is again, 3 times in a row. He granted the body to Joseph. Now, the other Gospels add things like he put a sword in his side and blood and water flowed. Not in Mark's Gospel. So it's a shorter story. He comes back and says, centurion's like, trust me, Pilate, we know how to kill people. These swoon theories, Jesus passed out, he got really sick, and he got hungry, and he wasn't really dead. I don't know what to do with the words like, is he dead? Is he dead? Yes, he's dead. The point is he's dead. He gives the body. He brought a linen shroud. I'm being a little sarcastic. He loves Jesus so much, he wraps him quickly and dumps him in a tomb. It's the first quick, expedient tomb he can find. In Matthew and then Luke's Gospel, it's Joseph's own tomb, and then he eventually says a new tomb no one ever used. Not in Mark's Gospel. He wraps him very quickly, puts him in a tomb, just a random one hewn out of rock. He rolled a stone against the door of the tomb. And, of course, the 2 Marys saw where he was laid.
And he didn't intend for that to ever be opened.
Well, yeah, this wouldn't have been...
Way of, you're saying then, of proving that he's dead.
Oh, the way of proving he's dead. And Mark's, I would say yes. Mark's way of proving he's dead is that Pilate asks a centurion to confirm it, and he gets wrapped up and then thrown into a tomb. Any single ancient person who heard that story would have said, oh, he's dead. That's it. No one would have heard he's really sick. He's sleepy. You put corpses in tombs. That's it, period. Now, you'll hear him preached that Joseph here is a secret disciple and he loves Jesus. And I know. Yes. The later Gospels start saying that. So either, little footnote, either Joseph of Arimathea really is, and Mark wants to omit all those facts because he has omitted those facts. Mark is trying to demonstrate that even Jesus' own body is not buried by one of his disciples. He's completely abandoned of any kind of Jewish respect. John the Baptizer's own disciples buried his body. That's what disciples do for the leader. Even after he's dead, his disciples are nowhere to be found. Mark's trying to drill the point home. He was abandoned. He's alone. Everyone disabandoned. Rolled a stone. He's done. It's over. That should be end of story. It's an absolute horrible, abject failure. Matthew and Luke and John start picturing Joseph very kindly, and all of a sudden he does this out of the kindness of his heart, and so forth.
But since we can't mix Gospels, didn't Jesus tell John that Mary was his mother when he was on the cross and getting ready to die?
So you just said we can't mix Gospels. Yeah, in John's Gospel, Jesus tells Mary, yeah, this is...
So John apparently did fall away.
John didn't fall away.
For the crucifixion.
Right, he didn't pick up a cross for Jesus alongside him, no. But he was there at the crucifixion, at least, in John's Gospel, yeah. That's right. But not in Mark or Matthew. I don't think it's in Matthew or Luke either. I think it's in Synoptics. But that's off of memory. I know it's in John's Gospel.
Haven't we said somewhere that Mark was quite young?
Well, last week we surmised it might be the case that Mark, we just don't know for sure.
And maybe he didn't know Joseph's. Maybe he didn't know as much about Joseph as the others did.
Right. Well, that brings up the issue. Anytime Mark says something, Matthew and Luke say differently than Mark didn't have. The question is, why not? It's either A, Mark didn't know it, he was ignorant. Whether he did, that would mean he didn't receive the oral tradition from someone. B, he knew it and didn't want to include it. There's only 2 options. That's really it. My own view, and some people don't like this view, but this is standard scholarship, but most church people don't like it because it sounds like the Bible, people are lying. My own view is that the gospel tradition just expanded. I think that typically what happened, that over time as the gospel written, it continued to make Joseph of Arimathea in a favorable light. It just was the natural thing. There were to honor the fact that he honored Jesus' body, he must have been such a kind, and it just gets better over time. Like the fish gets longer and longer. That's my opinion. In my opinion, that's the most natural reading. But if you don't believe that, that's fine. And you can say, no, he always was a disciple. Mark just chose not to put it. Okay. I think it just grew over time. I think, in my opinion, historically, by time traveled, Joseph Matthias was not a disciple of Jesus. I think he thought Jesus was a loser, and he had him killed, and he's being a devout guy. And the reason why he gets remembered, Joseph of Arimathea, of all the council who condemned him to death, is because that's the one guy who took his body off the cross. Had it been a guy named Mark, a guy named Bob would have been remembered as the one who did it. We don't know why Joseph, of all the other ones, he might have had hey, I'll go do it, you do it. I mean, who knows? But he did it. I don't know. But anyway, that's Mark's version. When the Shabbat was passed, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, they went to the tomb when the sun had risen. Because in that time period, the first day of the week is Sunday, named by the Romans the day of the sun god. So this is early on a Sunday morning. And they went to the tomb, and they were saying, of course, not the only thing had risen, right? The sun. Who's going to roll with his stone for us from the door of the tomb? Now they saw that Joseph, apparently in Mark's gospel, Joseph did it by himself. And you say, why do they say that? Either it means Mark is not answering a little question. They're like, why would they be confused? Couldn't three women get together and roll a stone? Or the answer is no. Maybe Joseph had a hard time rolling it. We don't know. The point is they're walking going, man, how do we get there? We're going to need some help. Maybe there'll be here someone who can help us move it away. Looking up, they saw the stone was rolled back. It was very large. That's the first time Mark tells us it was a big one. And we go, oh, that's probably why they were worried. And entering the tomb, they saw not Jesus. They saw a young man sitting on the right side, dressed in a white robe. White robe, of course, the whiteness always demonstrates the glory of God. And so angels are always white. God himself, the Father's white, and so forth. So this would now, in other gospels, this one white robe will just be called an angel. In Matthew and Luke, they'll just make it explicit. But in Mark's gospel, he doesn't say explicitly he's an angel, but a young man, white robe. And they were amazed. He said to them, don't be amazed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. They're like, He has risen. He is not here. See the place they laid him. Like, look for yourself. But go tell his disciples, and I can't believe it. And Peter, that he's going before you to Galilee. There you will see him as he told you. And so what's so astonishing in this text is, of course, several things. One is he's not there. He's going to see you. We expect that as an audience because Jesus said, I will be handed over, beaten, killed, and on the third day rise. So we're like, of course. What we were not expecting, if you're being real honest with the narrative, you were not expecting Peter had any chance. The resurrection is not surprising in Mark's gospel. And once again, it's been prophesied 3 times. What has not been prophesied is that Peter will be forgiven, or there'll be any kind of reconciliation at all. That's shocking. That's exactly the point. And that's exactly why he said, you tell his disciples and Peter. God's not done with Peter yet. People have asked me in the past, David, if I sin enough, if I blow it, is he done with me? And I'll say, until you're dead, no. Because I know the story of Peter. You can do some really, really horrible stuff, and God can redeem any situation. He just can. And until you tell me to the bitter end, he can. Had you asked Peter if I time traveled, you think Peter would have been shocked? I think, yep. I think he'd be like, it's over, man. I'm at home weeping. I blew the whole thing. But Jesus isn't weeping anymore. He's like, nope. They went out and fled the tomb for trembling or scared to death and astonishment. And, I forgot to say verse 7. It's plural. It's not singular, it's plural. So it's, but go tell the disciple that he's going before y'all. I'm from the south. That's how God intended to say y'all. Y'all see him as he told y'all. That means, of course, the male disciples and the female disciples. He told y'all. It's exactly what he told you. And in Mark's gospel, in every single time he predicted something, it came true. And so we're supposed to finish the gospel and go, guess what's going to happen? They're going to see him in Galilee. But verse 7, he says, go tell his disciples. And it goes, they go out and do what? They said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Now, you can interpret that to mean they literally told no one ever, or They meant they told no one, or they ran to go to the disciples. They didn't stop and tell people. They ran to tell the disciples. It can't mean they told no one ever. We have a story called the gospel, right? It can't mean that, whatever it might mean. Okay, period. Every single ancient manuscript we possess ends in verse 8. Every one of the most ancient, I should have said that. Every one of the most ancient manuscripts. The manuscripts that come a little bit later, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th centuries, they have different endings. The short ending adds another line or two to verse 8. And your Bible probably has it. It probably says the short ending or something like to it. Does it not? No footnote, nothing?
It just shows here that the earliest manuscripts and some other witnesses don't have verses 9 through 20. And then it puts 9 through 20 in italics.
Okay, well, let me read it to you. So this is what's called the actual ending. That's verse 8. But scribes didn't like that because it feels like it's very anticlimactic, right? The shorter ending is an extension of verse 8, and I'll read it from the English. But they reported briefly to Peter and those with them all that they had been told. And after this, Jesus himself sent out by means of them from east to west the sacred and imperishable proclamation of eternal salvation. Period. Then there's what's called the longer ending. That's also in other manuscripts. That's verses 9 through 17, 18, what is it? 9 through 20, 9 through 20. And that one is, now when he rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, from whom he had cast out 7 demons. She went and told those who had been, by the way, people always think Mary Magdalene was a prostitute. It never says that. She's always the one to cast out demons, but yet in every movie and TV show, every sermon, I don't know why it's hard to beat legends, man. She went away, she told them, I'm going to skip ahead because what really matters to me is the last little bit here. Verse 15, he said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to the whole creation. That quote I've seen many, many times in churches. I've seen it on billboards. I've seen it on banners. I've seen it in sermon quotes. And certainly Mark never said it. This is a much, much, much later addition to the Gospel of Mark. So that alone, for scholars, that's very problematic to quote from a verse that... Now, the closest analogy we had to this, or example, of course, is from Matthew 28, 19 and 20. And then this is, he who believes and is baptized will be saved, but he who does not believe will be condemned. And these signs will accompany those who believe. In my name, they will cast out demons. They will speak in new tongues. They will pick up serpents. And you say serpent, snakes. And if they drink any deadly thing, it will not hurt them. They will lay their hands on the sick, and they will recover. And after you've spoken them, goes from the heaven, as even a whole ascension. Amen. Now that part, they will pick up snakes, and if they drink deadly things, becomes the basis for the West Virginia snake handlers. And their assumption is if you don't get bitten, you have faith or you're blessed or whatever. And it comes from this verse, which Mark never said, ever. It's the only part in the entire New Testament. And they make a whole church about it. I remember watching a special on that. I'm sure I've said this before. They're still around. Well, it's been a few years ago when I saw the special. This guy, he must have been 70 or 80 years old, bites all over him. All over him. He had red... He's like, I've been bitten 6 times, whatever, like 80. I'm like, why are you bragging, man? You must be a wretched sinner to be bitten all the time. But he had been bitten and bitten and bitten. Like, I don't get it, man. That's supposed to be I think be 86, like, I've only been bitten twice. But
what snake do they use?
What snake? I don't know.
A ticked off one, evidently.
So there's a big debate in scholarship. Did Mark mean to end his gospel in verse 9 or not? Verse 8 or not? Verse 8 or not? And for a long time, scholars said there's no way. There's no way he meant to do that. There must have been. So there's either A, an original ending that has been lost, and some people make that argument. And one of the ways people make the argument is to say if you roll up a scroll all the way up, the very end of the scroll would have been the end of this chapter, and over time it got worn off, and so they lost it. That's one idea. The two is, though it was his original, or 3, it's some alternative ending we don't know about, or it's one of these. But again, no scholar thinks these endings were Markan that I just read, the shorter or longer, and no one thinks that because the most ancient manuscripts we possess don't have it at all. So it would mean that would have to be before the most ancient we have, then it skipped several generations and showed up again. No one would believe that in scholarship. No one's going to find that convincing. So it either means we have the original, he had one differently than it is, and it lost it, or it's intentional. And then, if I can say, I think it's in general to say that for decades and decades, almost everyone believed that he had one, we lost it. Nowadays, it's more in favor to say that was his original ending. And they cite evidence for that to say these seemingly anticlimactic and it's over happen in big literature like the Aeneid. Virgil's Aeneid and other major works end sometimes so abruptly that other non-Christians about non-Christian literature would make up new endings or write a volume 2 just to finish off the thing.
So the footnote, verse 9 is the ending?
Verse 8.
Verse 8.
Verse 8. What every single English translation that I know of today is the most ancient example we have. Whatever it's worth, as I'm teaching, I've been all the talking. I can't make up my mind. I've gone back and forth. I had an old textual criticism class and PhD, and I can't make up my mind. Part of me, I just feel like I go back and forth. Part of me thinks it can be the end of it because that, to me, the typical argument goes, of course he wanted it in there because, in fact, my former professor wrote his entire PhD dissertation on fear in the Gospel of Mark to try to tie in this ending, to say it fits perfectly. Anyway, because it's supposed to be an implicit charge to us. Will we go? What do we do when we're faced with confusing bewilderment at an empty tomb? Will we stay silent or will we go? Because it's the first time and the only time in the entire Gospel of Mark that they're explicitly told to go tell people about this resurrection. If you read it that way, you might think those women just failed. Again, more disciples who failed. And then the catch is Mark might have finished his gospel to the crowd at church and go, what about you? I think that preaches well. I'm just not as sure about it, but it preaches easier. On the other hand, I think Mark could have finished it and we lost it, but I don't know.
So
What do y'all think?
Have you ever found any of the true scrolls from Mark?
Well, the earliest full scrolls of the earliest full Gospels of Mark's, how do I say it? I'm so tired, I'm sorry. The earliest manuscripts we have with complete copies of Mark come about 250 years after Mark was probably written. So it's the early 3rd century.
They would have added this. In that amount of time, they could have added these other verses on then.
Well, they could have, but they didn't. The earliest manuscripts we have for him don't have those longer endings.
So can they tell by the way the manuscript's worn whether
Can't.
it was torn or lost or?
If it was torn or lost, it was before the copies we possess.
Okay.
So which means it would have happened in the first or second centuries. Then the copies we possess, they've been cleaned up, and they just stopped at verse 8. Gotcha. Yeah, so we don't have a manuscript where it's been ripped or something.
Can you tell that it's
Right.
been-
Not in the copies we possess.
Yeah. No Dead Sea Scroll. that got
Right.
that thing there.
Right. I'll stop there. Any questions or comments about anything in the entire gospel? Go ahead, Bo. And then
A question. Back when the soldiers were to not offend them.
to not offend them. I don't know. I thought you were going to say left it out because they know what happened. That's what I thought you were going to say. And that would say I find that pretty likely. Not to offend the Romans, maybe.
It says he had Jesus flogged. In verse 15.
Yeah, but I understand Bo to ask. He didn't describe it.
Oh, he didn't.
He didn't describe
the
it.
flogging? Okay. Like what's his name doing in the movie?
Yeah, like
Right.
like the other
Yeah.
gospels.
I got you.
He doesn't go into
Right.
detail.
Right. That's a good. I just don't know why he didn't include it. My immediate thought is he probably. I mean, I should say probably. If I were guessing, it's because the Romans, they know how it works. But the other Gospels, after the scourging or beating, remember he comes back, he tries again, and then he goes. Or anyway, but not in Mark's Gospel. Mark's trying to get on to the sad death. Then the question you're asking, would it have made the Romans not look as badly if they didn't
Well-
describe the beating?
That
Yeah.
did he not? He didn't want to offend them. He didn't tell the whole story
Maybe.
because he was trying to get them on his side, not
Right.
make them angry.
I do find that attractive because it seems to me that Mark does a fairly good job of making sure the Romans don't look that bad. Even when they don't know what they're talking about, like, surely he was the son of, they're nailing it. They're getting it. Not, I mean, that as a pun. But I would need some evidence to think that the Romans would have been, quote, maybe embarrassed or ashamed of scourging him. That's the part I'm not sure if I find that convincing. I don't know if a Roman would have heard that one. Oh, maybe a Roman and see, you say, well, maybe there are Roman Christians in the audience. Probably so. I think there's probably some Roman Christians, but I don't know. I don't have any reason to think the Roman Christians would have thought they were responsible for the scourging of Jesus just because they're Romans, if that makes sense. But that's my view. Yes, sir.
Did emotions or
Yeah. So did Jesus have normal human emotions? Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. It's just that in, well, yeah, not in Mark. Yeah. See, he cried over Jerusalem, but not in Mark. In Mark's gospel, Mark describes no feelings of Jesus past Gethsemane that I can remember, certainly not in the crucifixion. He cries aloud and breathes his last, but that's it. It doesn't say he's terrified, he's in anguish, whatever. And that's why I've said, more theologically, I've said this for years, to me, on a narrative level, man, I've experienced the most sacrificial part of the life of Jesus was not on the cross, it was in Gethsemane. When he relinquished his will and made up his mind, that was the watershed moment. I mean, our sins are forgiven in death and so forth. I mean, on a narrative level. That's the part we had agony and distressing, whatever. I think so. What you want to say any more past that? I mean, I don't know why we...
Something that came to my mind as
Yeah.
we're doing this, that, he knew everything, saw everything, but yet as he went through life, and growing up...
Oh, gotcha. Well, the point of he knew everything and he saw everything, we've talked about a few times, and I've done a blog and a podcast on that. My own view is that Jesus, in his earthly ministry, was not omniscient. I do not think he knew everything. Mark's gospel explicitly says that he was ignorant at times. The woman touches him. He said, "Who touched me?" In Mark 13, he says, "Not even the Son, not even the angels, no one knows when the return will be, but only the Father." Mark seems to go out of his way to make it clear that he's not omniscient. He doesn't know things. I mean, omniscient means all-knowing. So at minimum, either Jesus is lying when he says, "Not even the Son knows," or he's not lying. He says, "No, I don't know everything." Some things, when James and John, who said, "We want to see your left and your right," and he says, "It's not mine to get," but the Father is basically assign those seats. It sounds to me that Jesus says, "I don't know who's going to go left and right," and he hasn't told me that. I don't think Jesus needs to be actively omniscient in order to be God-kind. You can still believe you want Jesus omniscience, but it was on the subconscious level, or you didn't have access to omniscience. Maybe, okay. Theologically, that's what a lot of philosophers say. The Gospels don't say that at all, but